Lately, I've been using an awful lot of oil washes, airbrushes, and other cheats in my miniature painting videos, and today I felt like I could use a little bit of a palette cleanser. So I'm going to return to one of my favorite tried and true painting methods as I paint up Leon for the Cthulhu Death May Die board game. Welcome to Treehane Miniatures. Now, of course, when I say cheats, I mean that tongue-in-cheek. Washes, speed paints, the airbrush, they're all tools that are at our disposal to help us achieve a desired look while painting with techniques that suit our own individual styles. I like to dabble in all painting styles and use any tools at my disposal, but I always seem to circle back to my favorite technique. I like to use a straightforward layering approach to work my way from a black primer all the way up to some bright highlights. This gives me the most control over how the perceived light is interacting with the model. The darkest possible shadow color is already in place, and I can create the highlights as bright as I want. It creates an amazing amount of contrast on the miniature without having to use washes or speed paints. Taking a cue from the game art, I want this finished piece to have some dingy hues in the shadow areas, so I'm going to begin by applying a coat of chocolate brown to the entire miniature. This may seem like an odd choice for some parts of the miniature, specifically the blue shirt, but for each part of the miniature, we're going to mix this chocolate brown shadow color with the mid-tone color to create a secondary shadow color. This will create smooth transitions even when moving from brown to turquoise. First up is the skin. I mix Barbarian Flesh with the chocolate brown to create the secondary shadow color. I like painting miniatures from the inside out. Recesses first, then work my way out in layers. Since everything else on the model is layered on top of the skin, I usually like to start there. This helps avoid accidents. It's much more likely to accidentally swipe some paint across a raised surface that is already painted than one that is buried deeper in the sculpt. Plain old Barbarian Flesh is our mid-tone color for the skin. I thin each layer with just enough water so that it allows some of the previous layer to show through. This allows us to achieve smooth transitions between layers. Proper thinning will also ensure that the paint flows off the brush smoothly and doesn't leave brush strokes on the model. This focus on smoothness is really only important on the skin for this miniature. We can be much more free with the clothing, as any lack of smoothness will read as textured cloth. For the preliminary highlight, I mix ice yellow into the Barbarian Flesh. This is my standard approach to layering. I choose 3 colors, in this case chocolate brown, Barbarian Flesh, and ice yellow. Then as I layer up, I simply create intermediate layers by mixing the new color with the previous color before using the new color on its own. So the miniature is painted in 5 layers from the deepest shadow to the brightest highlight, without the use of washes, glazes, or any other techniques. For this miniature, I want the light source to be coming from the model's upper left, so I focus these initial highlights there. The right arm and leg will not get any highlights from here on out. Finally, the model gets highlighted with pure ice yellow. These are just placed on the left side of the face to draw attention there. At first, I felt that layering like this seemed overwhelming because of the sheer number of layers and having to mix 2 colors. But once I gave it a shot and came to the realization that as each layer gets smaller, it also gets much faster to apply, the method became less daunting to me. It's a very fun and rewarding way to paint, in my opinion. Moving on to the hair with some orange brown, I establish a base highlight on the goatee and do the same for Leon's noggin by highlighting in a halo pattern around his head. I'm using 3 colors for the hair as well if we include the chocolate brown, but there is no mixing here. In order for the hair to appear shiny, I want large jumps in color value from one layer to the next. And since I want the hair to ultimately appear brown, I leave plenty of the chocolate brown base coat visible. The second and final highlight for the hair is ice yellow. I just touch this into place on the goatee. I paint a small band of ice yellow highlight within the orange-brown layer around Leon's head and along his sideburns. The final look gives the hair a little sheen. On to Leon's firearm and glasses. These 2 items get a base coat of blue-black Pro Acryl. These are the only 2 items that will not incorporate chocolate brown into the shadows, and this blue-black paint will be the deepest shadow color. Even though these 2 items begin with the same base coat, they will be highlighted differently from here. Focusing on the glasses first, I use ice yellow to draw some curved reflections in the lower part of the lenses. A matte white would work here just as well, but ice yellow is already on my palette. I then glazed some Vallejo electric blue over these established highlights. This is a reason that any bright off-white paint will work here, because it's going to get covered up with a light blue paint to achieve the 1980s Don Johnson look. Miami Vice, baby. And now onto the shirt. I'm going to add some necrotic flesh to the chocolate brown to create a secondary shadow color. This is one of only 3 color layers that we're going to place over the chocolate brown to achieve our white look. Having these darker layers present will create depth and nuance to an otherwise boring white shirt. This is going to be the most visible shadow color when we're all done here. It will be particularly noticeable in the area below the chest just above the belly. The visible chocolate brown shadows are reserved mostly for the part of the shirt around the back and the downward facing area around the left side of the lay. Even though not much of the chocolate brown will be purely visible when we're all done, it's still an important layer as it aids us in layering up with the lighter colors over the initial black primer. For the next layer, I use pure necrotic flesh. This is actually going to be the mid-tone color for our white shirt. We'll get away with this because the surrounding clothing items are going to be darker than this undershirt, making the undershirt look lighter in color. Items don't need to be painted completely white in order to appear white. I do have every layer of paint that I put on the model thinned a bit with water so that I don't leave any noticeable brush strokes. And even though I apply the paint in thin layers, I'm not necessarily going for smooth transitions here. Cloth is textured, so that will be represented in the way that we apply the paint, often using short strokes and a little stippling. And this brings us to our final layer. I'm using Mummy Robe for the brightest highlights. This is an off-white color that has a bit of a peach hue to it. At least that's what my old eyes see. There are almost no full brush strokes with this layer. Lots of little short strokes, dots, and stipples. I highlight the upper portion of the shirt the most to draw attention toward the character's face. I edge highlight the ribbed collar of the shirt and pay particular attention to highlighting the upper pecs. I think that this is the perfect white recipe for Cthulhu Death May Die characters because of how grimy and desaturated the art looks. For a more pristine white, I would choose a different color combination to create the white look. Mixing dark jade with chocolate brown will create our secondary shadow color for the outer shirt. This is an odd color combination for me that I'm not 100% comfortable with starting out. I'm much more comfortable using dark violets as a deep shadow color for most bluish hues, something like, I don't know, dark plum pro acryl maybe? Anyway, incorporating the chocolate brown into every shadow layer will give uniformity to the dingy shadows across the entire model. This secondary shadow color is applied everywhere over the outer shirt except for the deepest creases in the back of the shirt. Next, I brush pure dark jade freely over the exposed areas of the shirt. As I'm doing this, I realize that this may be a little too dark for the mid-tone color of the shirt. Therefore, I cover the area quickly without much in the way of deliberate brush strokes. Normally, if this were the mid-tone color, I'd start drawing my brush strokes toward the light source and begin creating a little texture. But I have a brighter idea. I'm going to add bright pale green to the dark jade to create a mid-tone color. I feel that this mix brings the color of the shirt closer to the turquoise color found in the character art. This is sketched into place using some pretty broad strokes to create some texture. I make sure to cover more area of the cloth on the character's left side as this is where I want the light to appear to hit the model. On the character's right side, I leave much more of the previous layer visible, so it appears to be in shadow. I use bright pale green as the main highlight for the turquoise shirt. Despite it being called pale green, it makes a darn good highlight color for this blue cloth. The previous mid-tone color and this highlight color is where I find the most enjoyment when layering. It's fun creating textures on the cloth and adding depth to the paint scheme by having so much contrast between the light and shadow. It's also the point in the process where less time is spent on each layer and the paint scheme begins to come together. The bright pale green is a fine highlight color for this blue shirt, but I'm going to add ice yellow very sparingly as a final touch to the shirt. The character art shows that there is a faint pale yellow design on the shirt. I would like to achieve this overall aesthetic without having to painstakingly freehand little flower patterns all over the shirt. This is where Ice Yellow comes in to provide that color combination without the labor-intensive process behind it. Pro Acrylic Copper is the only paint used to dry brush a layer of color over Leon's watch and ring. I'm using tan flesh for the leather items like his belt and shoes. This is basically a highlight color for the chocolate brown leather. With the main focus area of this piece complete, I don't spend too much time on these auxiliary items. I simply add some Ice Yellow to the tan flesh to highlight just what would be hit by the light. This is the toe and side of the left shoe and the heel of the right shoe. It wasn't until I began painting the shoes that I realized that these were not boots. So I grabbed some necrotic flesh to hit the rib socks directly over the chocolate brown. Again, I'm not looking to spend too much time here, but I want all of the bits to look complete. And now it's time to get laid. I base coat the lay with Alien Purple by the Army Painter. I use this to cover all of the chocolate brown. Then I use Magenta Pro Acryl directly over the Alien Purple. I brush this over the raised surfaces of the lay. I'm not going for complete coverage here because I want some of the purple to show through in some random locations. This way, the lay presents more like it's made up of natural flowers. Finally, I highlight the lay with Ice Yellow. Once again, I want the other colors of the flowers to show through. I'm going for the overall aesthetic of the character art without having to paint any individual petals on the flowers. The pistol that Leon is carrying receives a quick edge highlight that consists of a mix of blue-black Pro Acryl and Ice Yellow. The shorts begin with a mix of chocolate brown and yellow ochre. I'm not sure why I waited until now to paint the shorts. I usually paint all of the character's accessories after I paint the main clothing items. I probably just needed a little mental break from layering up cloth after painting the two shirts. Anyway, this covers most, but not all, of the chocolate brown starting layer. Now I'm using yellow ochre to start building some texture on Leon's khaki shorts. On the model's right side, I'm drawing the strokes toward the left side, which is where the light source should be. I'm leaving a lot of the previous layer visible on his right leg, really focusing on the raised folds in the cloth. Leon's left leg gets quite a bit more coverage with the yellow ochre because it is more directly impacted by the light. In areas where I apply a second coat of the layer, I don't attempt complete coverage, and I use this second layer to build a little more texture by selectively increasing the opacity. Finally, the khaki shorts get a highlight of Ice Yellow. This is only applied to the upward facing part of the leg. The highlight is added sparingly, mostly on the creases in the fabric and on the hem of the shorts. It's painted in a way to further increase the textured look of the shorts. The final accessory to paint on Leon is the burning ember at the end of his cigar. First, I paint the tip white so that the following colors will appear brighter as they are layered over the white. Then I brush fluorescent orange over the white to create a hot glow within the ash. Last, I dry brush some burnt orange over the raised bits of the ash to represent the cooler parts of the cherry. And that's it. He's all done, using nothing more than layering. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of painters.